Hello everyone, my name is Nathan and today it's time to start a new GameMaker series. Earlier this year, GameMaker Studio 2 came out, and since I had so much fun with the first version, I thought it's time to relaunch this series. Now, as per usual with my GameMaker tutorials / let's make a game series, this could become potentially a game or maybe not. However, take it as it is going to teach you as much about the program as I know, and in return you will also give me a couple of tips so that we can do improvements and I can learn as well, and together we will progress into the creative world of programming games. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So without any further ado, let's actually go ahead and get this started. In this first episode, we're gonna learn about camera movement, which is a new feature in GameMaker Studio 2. We're gonna learn how to pan around, how to zoom, and also just as a little additional feature, we're gonna learn how to change the resolution. Now, if you're completely new to GameMaker, then don't worry, this video is also for you. I'm gonna try to explain everything I'm doing at least the first time. I'm not gonna go very slow, so you need to pay attention, but apart from that, we should be good. On the left side right here, you can see the basic folder structure of a game. Important categories for us are the sprites, the scripts, the objects, and the rooms. Sprites are basically just graphics. You can display them in your game if you want to, and you can also associate them with objects. The scripts are pretty much self-explanatory. Then objects are real physical things that are gonna be in the game. They can look like a sprite, or you have to associate them with a sprite, otherwise they're gonna look like nothing. And finally, the rooms are the game areas. Basically, this is your game world. If you make a room really big, bigger than any computer screen for instance, then of course you will have to implement a zooming or scrolling functionality. The first thing I want to do is create a couple of graphics that we're gonna need. It's not gonna be anything spectacular in the beginning, but I'm gonna make a category up here called sprites. Workspaces in GameMaker Studio 2 actually work really great. I'm such a fan of this improvement. What we can do is be in the corresponding workspace and then create a sprite, and it's just gonna pop up here. And this is an infinite workspace. You can zoom in and out, you can double click objects to get closer to them, you can double click them here as well to get into this category. It's absolutely amazing in my opinion. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna call this SPR, which is the prefix for sprites. We should always have prefixes so we know in which category certain objects and items belong. But this sprite is gonna be my sprite core. So this is the core object that I'm gonna establish that is gonna contain the most important code. It's gonna contain the camera functionality, etc, etc. I also want to make this as large as one single tile, which in my game is going to be 32 by 32 pixels. So we can also go ahead and edit this image, for instance, do something like that in the top corner. And we have built something like an arrow that is pointing towards the top left corner of the image, which is the zero origin point. Now that we've edited this graphic, we can close this tab off again and we can see we still have it here. We can minimize it, or we can also get completely rid of it within this workspace, and it's still gonna be in here, ready for us to drag it in again. Next up, I'm also going to create another sprite which is going to help us distinguish the floor a little bit, know in which direction we're going. I'm going to call this sprite tile. That's not going to be an important graphic in the end, it's just going to help us. It's also going to be 32 by 32 pixels, and I'm going to edit it to be, let's see, we could do black on white, it doesn't really matter. Oh, actually I didn't mean to do that. I meant to drag something like that, and then we can do the inside with black. Great, so we have our two sprites ready. This is all we're gonna need for today's episode. I'm gonna create yet another workspace, and this one I'm gonna call objects. Yeah, I think I'm gonna do that. Or we could call it core. I think that's more appropriate. So everything that we do with the core is gonna go into this workspace. Now, as I said, a sprite cannot physically be in the room, but we want this to be in the room, in the game. So what I have to do is create an object that corresponds with it. Let's go ahead and create this object, and I'm gonna call it obj as a prefix and core. Now we want to go ahead and select the graphic we've made before. every object is able to have certain events. If I add an event, you can see, for instance, there's the create event, which simply means whenever it is spawned, it's going to execute whatever you have on this create event. So if I add this create event, you can see we have certain possibilities to add what happens when this create event occurs. In order for this create event to occur, we of course have to physically bring the object core into the game. And for that, we have to have an area. The area, as I mentioned before, is going to be dictated by the room. So maybe let's go ahead and create a room. Create that. I want this to be called RM for room prefix and then main for the time being. We might change that in the future, we will see. Cool. So if we zoom out a little bit, you can see this is our current room, and this would also be the size of our window at the moment because we haven't set any parameters. So the room size dictates your resolution if you don't act on that. First things I want to do is I want to click my background here, and I actually want to grab the sprite we've made before, and I want to make sure it's being tiled horizontally and vertically. So now we have our grid all the way to the end of the room. Next up, we also want to make sure that our object is within the room. As I said, it needs to be physically in the room to execute any events. And me spawning it inside of here is actually gonna accomplish just that. So I'm gonna drag it right there, and we have it in the game. And as soon as I start the game, it's considered created. And therefore, in here, in this create event, everything is gonna be executed. However, this is not all we have to do. Of course, I don't want to go with this resolution or room size. So let's go ahead and close these two tabs. We want to have a look at the properties of the room main. We want to open up viewports and cameras, and also we want to utilize the first or the viewport 0. What we have to do is enable the views and also make viewport 0 visible. Then we want to go ahead and choose the lowest resolution possible for our game. I guess that's gonna be 640 by 380 or something along these lines? Probably. 640 by 380, and we're gonna do the same thing here. 640 by 380. And now you can see, I'm not sure if you can see it well, but there is an actual viewport. So we have our room, which is this size, but then we have a smaller viewport, which is only covering up this area. Maybe to see this better, we should go with a different sprite. Well, actually, I like this color scheme better. There we go. So now you can actually see the viewport as a white line. This is our new resolution. This is the size of the window that would open if we started the game right now, and the rest of the room is not going to be visible to us. However, we want to do more. We also want to follow an object. So this object right here, we're going to steer around the room, and the viewport is going to follow it at all times. So what we're going to do is set up the horizontal border, which is also going to be 640, and the vertical border, which is going to be 380. Man, I have the feeling it's like 360, isn't it? Let me quickly check those resolutions. 640 by 360. Let me make sure we fix that right here. It's just a resolution I usually don't use, but we're gonna go with the lowest resolution. This should be 16 by 9 aspect ratio. Good. Next up, I also want to set the horizontal speed, and I believe, can we just leave that at -1 and it's gonna be infinite? I'm actually gonna try that. We want a very high speed. If this doesn't work, I'm gonna set it to like 10,000 or so the viewport can follow the object instantly. And of course, the object to follow is the object core. There we go. Now I think we did set up everything we needed for the room, at least for the time being, so we can go ahead and decide what happens actually when the core object is being created. And what I want to do is I want to execute a piece of code. So we're gonna do our own coding. What I want to do is actually make this a little bit larger, something along these lines. I want to get rid of that and make this larger as well, so I have enough space to code. Very well, so here you can already see the naming convention. What we have to do is exchange this with another string. I'm gonna do a camera setup. And you can see right here in the list, the name changed. The more scripts you get, the more options you have to click and actually go directly to them. If we create a script that is really large, then I recommend you to actually create a script right here that is gonna be independent, and then you can choose a script execute option, I think right there, and instead of writing the script here, you will just call the script. So first things first, I want to set the starting position. Now don't forget, everything we're doing is going to be applied to the core object because that's where we have the script. The first thing I want to set is the starting position. What we want to do here is we want to set the x coordinate of our object core, and we want to set it to room width, which is a predefined variable. Everything that is green is recognized as something that belongs to the GameMaker language in terms of a variable. But the room width we want to divide by 2, which is basically the center of the room then. And also we want to do the same thing with the y, so room height divided by 2. And what we should see is now our core object in the center of the room and not the edge anymore. So that was easy enough. Let's go ahead and do something about the camera. For instance, we want to set up our own variables for camera speed. So blue is actually what I decide to be a variable, and I can use this variable later on across the object. My camera speed I'm gonna set to 16 for now. Doesn't really matter to me. I think it's good if it's divisible by 32, but I don't think that is actually necessary. We will see. Also, I'm gonna set my cam width, which is my current resolution, so the lowest resolution. The cam width is 640 and the cam height is 360. Good, so these are the camera parameters I'm gonna need. So we're just setting up a couple of variables basically that we can use later on, because in the create event this only happens once. And in order to do something multiple times or do checks, we will have to go somewhere else than on the create event. However, in here we also want to set a couple of window properties. So that's the actual game window, and we want this to be 720p. So I kind of want to start zoomed in slightly because we're gonna start at 360p. However, the window itself of the game is gonna be 720p, if you know what I mean. So I'm gonna say window width equals 1280 and the window height equals 720. Now, of course, these are just variables that I set up myself in order to make it easier on me, but we still have to go ahead and do the window set size. You can see this is turning orange, which means it's gonna change an inbuilt variable that GameMaker has. And of course we want to go with window width. You can see here at the bottom what you have to put into the brackets. So if I remove the comma, you can see we are at the width at the moment. We have to set the width here. If I do the comma, then it switched to the height. This is very useful in order to know which parameters go in there. Anyways, this is going to be window height. We want to close this off and finish it with a semicolon as usual. Good. Now, one more thing I want to do in case we want to introduce even more resolutions, then let's say we just go with 720 and 1080 for now, but maybe we want to have more resolutions and maybe there's a monitor which has a lower resolution, I don't know. So let's go ahead and actually analyze the monitor this game is being played on. We can go ahead and make a variable called monitor width. Why the heck not? And this is gonna be filled with monitor get width, which of course is orange. And since it's a get function, we're basically filling up this variable with the pixel size of the monitor. Same thing with monitor height. We want to display get height. There we go. And then, you know, as a nice feature, what we could do is set the window in the perfect center of the monitor. I think that's actually a good idea. So it's not popping up on the top left or whatever. We can do that with window set position. And we want to do, you can see the X and Y position. The X position, of course, should be the monitor width divided by 2, right? Yeah, let's do that. The monitor width divided by 2. However, we must be careful, of course. Let's say this here is the monitor and then this here is my game window. The game window's origin is also on the top left. So if I just divide it by 2, then it's gonna go in the center, but counting from the top left corner. So what we have to do is offset this also a little bit towards the left side, namely by half of the window size. So that's very important. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say minus window width. So now we're in the center of the monitor width, and we calculate minus the center of the actual window, and therefore this should be the perfect center. We're going to do the same thing with the height. So let me see, monitor height is going to be divided by 2 minus window height divided by 2. And this should be it, theoretically. Yeah, maybe let's go ahead and test the game briefly. There we go. You can already see our guy isn't in the top left corner anymore, and we can also presume that we are not with the camera. So this actually worked out pretty well. We are in a 720p window, and the window is in the perfect center. Great, so that was our camera setup. Now let's go ahead and actually add another event. I want to add the step event, and we're just going to do a normal step event. And this is actually happening every single frame. So in the end, we're probably going to have something like 60 frames per second or whatever. And therefore, this is going to be executed 60 times per second. Let's go ahead and do another execute code right there. This one here is going to be called the camera zoom. That's what we're going to do first of all. Now we're gonna need a couple of variables. We're gonna need to know where is the camera at the moment. So we're gonna say cam x for the camera x position, and we have a get variable for that. So all we have to do is say camera get view x. And of course, the camera we are talking about is the view camera 0. This is the camera view that we set up in the rooms. We enabled this one. Same thing with cam y, of course. We also need to get the y position. So let me quickly add that. Y view camera 0. Great, so we got that out of the way. What we want to do now is do the zoom. So if we use the mouse wheel down or mouse wheel up. Now, mouse wheel down means actually towards you. So that is kind of a confusing thing. It actually thinks the same way you would scroll down, right? Anyways, if we mouse wheel down, right, that's something we can use in GameMaker. We're gonna define what happens when we mouse wheel down. First of all, we have to define a limit, basically. We want to zoom out with mouse wheel down, but we only want to zoom out a certain amount, and then it's gonna prevent us from zooming out any further. So we can say as long as the cam width is lower than something we are defining, only then it's gonna allow us to zoom out further. Makes sense, right? Yeah, I think I'm gonna do something with my tile width, which is 32 times 3. Let's do 96 times, yeah, let's just do 960 or something like that. We can always adapt it if it is not far enough. But let's say if cam width is below 960, then we want to change the cam width, and we want to do this in the perfect aspect ratio, and we want to do it plus 32, which is one tile size. So the width would be the aspect ratio 16, and then the cam height would be aspect ratio 9. So if you apply this to 32, then what we should do is plus 18, and this is something I learned, but it's pretty useful, so it's not being distorted if you use the exact aspect ratio. Good, now that we have that, let's go ahead and set the camera view size, because we do have the variables, and we want to set the camera 0 view. What do we want to do? We want to set the width and the height, and of course we have saved that in cam width and cam height. There we go. Also, something we have to do is set the borders of the camera. So we're gonna do the same with the border instead of the size, view camera 0. And we want to do the same thing with cam width and cam height here. Great, now I already know we're gonna need to make some corrections in the end, but I'm gonna show you the error first, and we're gonna make the corrections later on. What we first want to add is an else if statement, because of course now we are only mouse wheeling down. We also want to mouse wheel up. So we're gonna say else if mouse wheel up. Then we want something else to happen, and we also want to limit that. So let's say if the cam width is bigger than let's say 320. That's 32 times 100. If that is the case, then we want to allow zooming in. Zooming in, of course, we're going to do the same way as before. So we're going to set the cam width, our current cam width, minus 32, and the cam height minus 18, which is the perfect 16:9 aspect ratio. Of course, we also have to set the view, etc. And I think we can just copy this over and paste it right there, because it's essentially the same thing, right? Just with different settings. Great, so this script should actually already work. Of course, it's not gonna work very well without the corrections, but let's go ahead and test it. There we go. So I should be able to zoom in, as you can see, and zoom out, but it won't allow me to go any further than this or any further than that. That's not too bad. It's not what I wanted exactly. I think I want to zoom out further, but it's a start. Good. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna set up yet another script. This one is gonna be a little bit different. So let's go ahead and execute yet another code. Let me see. We need the window size, right? But I think before we do that, I want to add yet another script, to be honest with you. Yeah, let's go ahead and add yet another execution code, and we're gonna take care of the window size the last. So this one is gonna be the camera pan, of course. We need to be able to pan around, that is important. And we're gonna do that with a WASD. For that, we're gonna say if keyboard check ord, which is a letter, basically, we want to check for the letter D. And also we want to make sure that we are not outside of the room. We want to make sure that we are actually within our current viewport in the center, and we cannot go any further than that. But maybe let's wait with that, not to be too confusing. We're just going to do that for the time being. If we hit the D key, then we want to say x plus equals cam speed, which is the speed we set up in the create event. So I think I forgot a bracket right there. Beautiful. Now we can basically copy this over 3 more times. And right here we want to say if we hit the A key, then we want to go to the left. So I'm just using this order because I want to go with XX and then YY. So this should be Y and Y minus. And then we want to do, what should this be? Y plus would be downwards. So that would be S, and then we have W right there. Great, so let me show you what we have. Now I can actually move this guy around, as you can see, but I can move it towards the corners as well. However, the viewport is not gonna follow me. The camera is actually stuck on the edge of the map. So what we want to do is we want to prevent this guy from being able to go further than the camera. And for that, we're gonna add an AND functionality. We're gonna say we can only press D as long as the X is smaller than the room width minus the cam width divided by 2. Simple as that. As for the A key, we can do it even simpler. We want to say and if X is bigger than the cam width divided by 2. Great, now we can, I believe, copy this over and add it right there. We can copy this over, come on, and add it right here. But of course we have to set the Y and also the room height. Oh well, I should have rewritten it. Would have taken me the same amount of time since I have to change everything. But Y and cam height. There we go. And I think with that we already solved the problem. So if I go ahead at the edge of the map, you can see, yeah, we are actually being stuck right here. I cannot go any further than that. I can also test it on the top. Yeah, doesn't work. So that's great. Now there's one single problem. For instance, I can zoom in and this allows me to go even further out. However, if I zoom out now, you can see that this guy isn't in the center anymore and I can move it, and only when it gets back into the center the camera is gonna follow. And that's what I meant with corrections before. We have to do the corrections only when we zoom out, because of course that's when it occurs. So let's go ahead and say if X does not equal cam X plus cam width divided by 2. So we just check if it is in the center of the camera view. And if it is not, then we want to change something about it. I also want to add another argument here, because the possibility is of course also with Y. So if Y doesn't fit the cam Y plus cam height divided by 2, then we want to make sure that that is actually the case. So we say x equals cam plus cam width divided by 2. Oh geez, there are going to be so many spelling mistakes, aren't there? And then y equals cam y plus cam height divided by 2. But this should be our corrections. Let's have a look at it. So we are at the edge of the map. I'm gonna zoom in, go to the edge again, and if I zoom out, then you can see... I'm not sure. Yeah, I think it is happening. This is always in the center. Before, that wasn't the case. It's actually not the perfect center if I think about it, but it's close enough. And you have to imagine, you won't be able to see this yellow thing in the end. It's just gonna feel like a normal zoom. So if we go up here, I zoom in and then zoom out. Yeah, it's correcting itself more or less towards the center. That's great. So corrections are good enough. That's all we need for that script. So I'm gonna make sure this is just as big as we need it. We go to the Windows size now. Actually, you know what? The Windows size we're gonna do with the next episode. We now have basic camera zoom and also camera pan in the game using a core object. And that was probably enough to intake for one episode. The next time we're gonna learn how to change the resolution. And we're just gonna toggle between 720p and 1080p for now. But yeah, I think with that out of the way, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're up for this project, and don't forget to leave your suggestion on what kind of a game we could do. I mean, I really have no idea, and it would be interesting to hear your ideas about that. But with that out of the way, have a great time, and hopefully I'm going to catch you in the next episode. Bye bye.